So how do you figure out what something is really worth? And I'm not talking about a house or a car. I mean something way more complex, like an option on a bond that might not pay out for another 20 years. How in the world do you pin a single fair price on a future that's so uncertain? Well, it turns out modern finance has this beautifully logical and powerful answer, and it all starts with a simple idea: getting rid of free money.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at a glitch in the market that this whole framework is designed to stop. Then, we'll hit the simple, powerful idea that fixes it, the law of one price. After that, we'll see how you can actually build prices from the ground up and then how to perfectly copy a future payoff. And finally, we'll see how this all works in the real world and, what happens when these perfect models run into our messy reality.
So before we jump into the super elegant solution, we've really got to understand the problem it's solving. And at its core, it's all about consistency, because without a logical framework, the market can start to break down in some really, really weird ways.
This question, it seems so simple, right? But honestly, it's one of the deepest questions in all of finance. And the answer is pretty easy for some things and incredibly complex for others.
Just think about it like this. Pricing a cup of coffee, it's pretty straightforward. You've got the cost of the beans, the milk, the labor, and of course what people are willing to pay. But pricing a complex derivative, like an option on a bond, whoa, its value depends on a whole bunch of factors that are changing all the time. Interest rates, market volatility, how much time is left. Its value isn't just known, it has to be calculated, using a consistent, logical framework.
The main problem this whole framework is built to solve is something called arbitrage. You can literally think of it as a glitch in the system. It's a free money opportunity with zero risk. It's what happens when the exact same thing is selling for two different prices at the exact same time. And in an efficient market, traders are looking for these glitches 24/7, and that's what keeps the whole system honest.
In theory, the process is dead simple. You spot them as pricing, you simultaneously buy the cheap one and sell the expensive one. And boom, just like that, you've pocketed a risk-free profit. But here's the thing. In the real world, there are thousands of traders with supercomputers all hunting for these same opportunities, which means they basically vanish in the blink of an eye. The very principle that prevents them from sticking around is the foundation of all modern valuation.
And that brings us to the really elegant solution, the core idea that holds everything else up, the law of one price, or as it's often called, the no arbitrage principle. This quote right here gets to the absolute heart of it. That key word is replicates. If you can build a package of other assets, a kind of synthetic twin, that gives you the exact same future payout as the thing you're trying to price, well, you've basically cracked the code.
Let that sink in for a second. If two different things guarantee you the exact same amount of money in the future, they must have the same price today. Why? Because if they didn't, you'd have an arbitrage opportunity, a free lunch. And as we know, the market does not do free lunches.
Okay, so that's the theory. It sounds great, but how does this actually work in practice? Well, we start by building a price for something fundamental, the price of pure time. And we capture that idea in something called the yield curve.
We use a really cool process called bootstrapping, and the name is perfect because it's like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. We take market prices we can actually see, the prices of normal coupon-paying bonds, and we use them to figure out something we can't see directly. And that's the pure interest rate for lending money for, say, exactly 1 year or exactly 2 years, with no other funny business in between.
So we start with something that looks like this, a par curve. This is our raw material from the market. It tells us that, for instance, a brand new 2-year bond would need to pay a 2.5% coupon just to be worth its face value, or par. This is the data we can actually see.
And the process is just brilliant. The first step is a piece of cake. For a 1-year bond, the par yield is the zero coupon rate. Easy. So now we know that piece of the puzzle. Next, we look at the 2-year bond. We know its price, we know its coupon, and now we know the 1-year rate to use on its first payment. The only thing we don't know is the 2-year rate, so we solve for it. Then we just move on to the 3-year bond and do it again. Step by step, we build this complete, totally arbitrage-free set of interest rates.
Okay, so we've built a price for time. Now, let's get to the really tricky part: uncertainty. How do you value something like a stock option where the payoff isn't even guaranteed? Well, the principle is exactly the same. You replicate it.
The big challenge here is that uncertainty, right? We have no idea if a stock price is going to go up or down. But what if we could create a portfolio, like a special recipe of the stock itself plus some risk-free cash that perfectly mimics the option's payoff no matter which way the stock moves? This is what's called a replicating portfolio. And to make it work, we had to start with a slightly simplified world, a model where the stock can only move to one of two possible prices. In this binomial model, we can actually mathematically construct a perfect twin for our option.
And here's what that looks like in action. Let's say we have a call option to buy a stock at $100. If the stock goes up to 120, that option's worth $20. If it goes down to 90, the option is worthless. Now, by carefully choosing exactly how many shares of stock to buy and how much money to borrow, we can build a portfolio that is also worth exactly $20 in the up scenario and 0 in the down scenario. See that? The payoffs match perfectly.
And this is the magic. Because the payoffs are identical, the law of one price kicks in and says their value today has to be identical. So how much is the option worth? It's worth exactly what it costs you to build that replicating portfolio right now. We didn't guess the price, we re-derived it with pure logic.
Now, this is not just some theory from a textbook. These principles are the absolute bedrock of how trillions of dollars in assets are valued every single day on trading desks all around the globe.
So in the real world, instead of using government bonds, pros often use something called the swap curve as their pure arbitrage-free benchmark. From that starting point, they can measure the extra yield a corporate bond offers for taking on its risk. That's called a Z-spread. And this logic goes even deeper. You can actually think about credit risk itself using these same ideas. Owning a company's stock is kind of like owning a call option on that company's assets. It's all connected by this incredibly powerful idea of replication.
And here you go. This is what it actually looks like out in the wild. This screen is showing credit spreads for a bunch of bonds plotted against that US dollar swap curve we just talked about. Traders use this exact kind of tool to spot relative value, to see if one bond looks cheap or expensive compared to another, all of it based on these arbitrage-free principles.
So we have this powerful, perfectly consistent framework, but it's so important to remember that it's all built on models. And models are, by their very definition, a simplification of reality.
Take the famous Black-Scholes-Merton option pricing model, for example. It's really just a more advanced version of that replication idea we saw. But it works by making some pretty heroic assumptions. It pretends stock returns follow a nice, neat bell curve, that volatility never changes, and that trading is totally free. Now, these are really useful fictions that make the math possible, but we all know reality is just a whole lot messier than that.
And that really brings us to our final thought here. This arbitrage-free framework gives us an essential logical anchor for how we value things. It creates a perfectly rational map of the financial world. But the real world, the territory itself, is often shaped by fear, by greed, and by totally unexpected events. So the critical question we have to ask is, what happens when this perfect map meets that messy, unpredictable, and deeply human territory?